Hi. The Iridium Mark II desktop looks much like the Mark I, except for the color and a new flavor knob, but inside it is a new board with more flash and RAM storage that unlock some pretty interesting new features, including 4 timbres instead of 2, with a round-robin feature, a new waypoint synthesis engine, and innovative per-key parameter lock mode. Waldorf is also offering an upgrade path for users of the first-generation synths, they need to be sent in and the process isn't cheap, but at least there's an upgrade path if you want. In this video, I'll take a look at what the second generation Iridiums can do so you can judge whether it's worth the upgrade or not. I'll also cover a few new features introduced for all Iridiums in firmware version 4.0 and discuss pros and cons versus the competition. Before I start, a quick disclosure. Waldorf sent me Iridium Mark II. Other than that, no money changed hands. They have no say over the content of this video and don't get to see it before it's published. Okay, let's start with an overview. Waldorf's Iridium/Quantum family has quite a few members. The Desktop Mark I and now the Desktop Mark II, Iridium Core, Iridium Keyboard, and the Quantum. Aside from Quantum, which has analog filters, all the synths in this series share the same platform and most of the same features, except, of course, those that are exclusive to Iridium Desktop Mark II. Also note that the Quantum Mark II doesn't have the second generation board as the Desktop Mark II. If you're not familiar with what these synths are, they're pretty much the most capable hardware synths you can buy in terms of sheer number of synthesis engines. Probably the freaks from Arturia have more, but each of those engines have only 3 basic parameters, whereas here each is a fully fledged synth with plenty of parameters and options to explore. Now, I already reviewed what these can do in a separate video, so I won't go over all the details here, but in a nutshell, the signal flow is as follows. Each voice has 3 oscillators, which is probably the biggest synth understatement I've ever seen, because each of these oscillators can be in one of 6 main modes, either wavetable, which is a fully fledged wavetable synth, waveform, which is a virtual analog synth that itself has up to 8 different sub-oscillators, and these aren't sub-oscillators in the traditional sense because you can detune them to different frequencies. Then there's Particle, which is actually 2 engines, both a sample-based engine that supports multi-samples, so you can spread out different samples across the keyboard's range. And it also has a granular synth engine built in, so it's really 2 in 1. Then there is the Resonator, a physical modeling-based engine that can respond to exciters based on samples. Then there's Kernels, a 6-operator FM and cross-mod synth. And then finally a new Seeds engine, which is itself a multi-engine mode that lets you morph between different synthesis engines. More on this later. So each of these 3 oscillators then get routed into the filters or around the filters, then optionally into a digiformer, which is a multi-mode module that can act as a drive, as a comb filter, and as a regular filter. The filters, by the way, both themselves and the digiformer, have multiple modes and multiple models you can choose from. And then all of this goes into 5 effect slots, which you can also route in different ways in serial or in parallel. Then on the modulation side, the Iridiums are no slouches either. You've got 6 envelopes and 6 LFOs. There's a complex modulator, which is so complex they wrote it with a K. You can use the screen as an XY pad mod source. It has a built-in note sequencer, which itself has 8 parameter automation lanes. And then all this goes into a 40-slot mod matrix with plenty of sources and destinations to choose from, and a per-slot controller as well, which many synths don't have. The Iridium Desktop Mark II also has note locks, which we'll talk about soon. All Quantum/Iridium synths share the same interface, a touchscreen with 6 endless detent push encoders. You tab around the interface, the main pages of the interface, using these buttons on top, and then you'll often get sub-tabs for the different elements within a page, you'll often see additional parameters here on the bottom. This little screen on the left can show one of multiple things, depending on what you'd like to see. You'll see the 2 or 4 in the case of the Mark II timbres here on the bottom right. So the synths are mostly different in their selection of knobs and non-velocity sensitive pads. The Quantums have 8 analog filters. Otherwise, it's 16 voices across the board, except the Iridium Core, which has only 12. The build of all the synths in this series is excellent. The enclosures are all metal. The encoders or pot knobs super solid. The touchscreen is overall very responsive, except on pages which are particularly busy, where you might notice some lag. The screen is LCD, not OLED, but it has reasonable viewing angles. In terms of connectivity, I won't go over all the synths in the series, but as far as the Iridium Desktop Mark II is concerned, I won't read all these out to you, but there are plenty of options. The one place where it lacks compared to some other multitimbral synths is that there's only one single stereo output, and USB doesn't carry audio. Some of its competitors might have multiple output pairs or multiple channels over USB. Then in terms of storage, like I mentioned, the Mark II has double the drive storage and double the RAM compared to the Mark I. Okay, let's dive in and talk about the new features in Desktop Mark II. The first is that it has 4 onboard timbres compared to just 2 on all the other Iridiums. You can layer these 4 timbres one on top of the other and load up completely independent presets into each of them. So in the case of what I was playing, that's a lot going on at once, but you can also split them either across the keyboard or have them respond to different MIDI channels. And interestingly, and exclusive for the Mark IIs, you can also round robin between the different layers. And there's also a random round robin option, which obviously sounds odd when one of the layers is percussion, but this opens up a lot of creative opportunities, especially since you can use the internal sequencer as a source to round robin across all the timbres. The controller section, by the way, determines which layers are affected by the mod wheel, pitch bend, and so on. You could load different presets into each layer from this page, so if I wanted to replace my percussive patch with something else, let's just go for, let's maybe load this one. So as we round robin through the layers, it sounds like this. Certainly something that's fun to experiment with. By the way, the Iridium already had a round robin option for samples. So this is a single patch that's round robining between different samples. All this in a single timbre. So the synth was no slouch previously. Now it can do even more with multiple timbres. Okay, moving on, let's start with an init preset and talk about the new Seeds oscillator type. So what's going on here? Waldorf calls this waypoint synthesis. It may look like a wavetable, but it's not. The idea is that you travel between different timbral waypoints, also called vectors here, up to 12 of them, where each waypoint can be one of several synth engine types. So for example, here we've got 5 of them. If I head into edit, you'll see that we're actually morphing between a parts engine, a wavetable engine, FM, ring mod, and a dirt engine traveling between these different waypoints. In this case, we've got 5, but like I mentioned, if you want, you can increase the vector count to up to 12. So now we're traveling between 12 of these, as you can see on the list here. So I guess it's similar to a wavetable, except that here, each step you modulate through, instead of being a single cycle waveform, is an entirely different synth engine. So let's go through these quickly. I will reduce the number of vectors so we have only 1. And by the way, if we look at count, we've got 2 of them now. If we have just 1, then it's in mono. If we increase the count, then we've got control of the stereo spread. To keep it simple, let's just stick with 1. So the first vector or waypoint type is a parts engine. The idea here is that you've got 4 sine waves. You can control the level of each of the sine waves. And if you want, just be left with 1. And then the frequency ratio of the part you select. So we don't want 1 sine wave. Let's bring these back. Play with a ratio. And that's how you sculpt sounds with the parts engine. So this works well for organ style sounds. Let's move on to the next seed type, which is wavetable. So here we've got our selection of factory wavetables. And we can move through the wavetable position. Now note that we can't modulate these parameters. So in Iridium, if you don't see the word mod here, for example, like you do here and here and here, then you can't modulate a parameter. You can, of course, create another vector with a different wavetable, by the way, and morph into that. But per waypoint, it's just a single wave position from the wavetable. You could morph back and forth, but the point of this isn't another wavetable synth. Anyway, so that's the wave vector type. Let's move on to the next, which is FM. This is a simple dual operator FM synth. You've got control over the ratio between the 2 oscillators, the mod depth or FM index, and the ratios can be either inharmonic, feedback for more chaotic sounds, or harmonic. So that's the FM type seed or waypoint. And again, all these parameters are not modulatable, only the travel through the different vectors or seeds. The next seed type is ring mod. This cross mods a sine wave with a wavetable. And you can choose any one of the factory wavetables, as well as the ring mod ratio, both with harmonic ratios or not. And you can scan through the wavetable, the factory wavetable. And again, all of these are not modulatable, just the selected vector position. Then the final seed type is a noise generator. This can be either simple white noise, pink noise, crackle, and Geiger. And these are playable if you increase resonance. So that's the core of the Seeds engine. You've got a few tools here. And lucky for randomization of the entire settings of the engine. So these options pretty much speak for themselves. Crazy. Parts. Waves. Complex. Abstract. I gotta say, all these randomizations are really well done. Often resulting in musically pleasing timbral journeys. Anyway, while you can't modulate through the individual seed parameters, you can modulate through position, and free envelope 1 has been set up to help with this. Just increase the envelope amount. And of course, you can edit free envelope 1 in any way you like. Okay, let's move on and init this preset and talk about the next new feature for the second generation Iridiums, and that's note locks, which you'll find on the panel on the note locks tab in the mod page. So by default, all the notes in a patch play the same way. In this case, say this. That's how synths have been working for ages. The note locks option lets you change the timbre of a sound on a per note basis. So let's say, for example, that I didn't like the way that B on octave 0 sounded. I could hit record and now change up to 16 parameters in the timbre of that note. And you do that by pressing a note and then turning a knob. So for example, I wanted, say, it to sound like this. So now B0 has this waveform and the other's this one, which isn't that different. So let's maybe make it more extreme, a simple sine wave. So now B0 is a simple sine wave and the other's a complex sound. C1, let's say I wanted to change that as well, say to this shape. So now that's the shape of C1, B0, and the rest of the notes. Now it can get even more extreme. I could change the entire wavetable for a note. So now this has this shape, but then the others obviously sound entirely different. I could continue going around the synth engine. So if I felt that this was too sharp, I could say turn the filter down on it. So now the filter is down on this note, but not on the other notes. Let's maybe also go to the digiformer and turn it on for this note and increase the gain. So now it's off for the other notes, but on for this note. Let's choose a different type, say a comb filter. So now this note has a comb filter and the others don't. This also works for the effects, but not polyphonically. So let's say if I wanted to add a reverb onto this note, then it won't apply to the other notes and it'll cut the reverb off. When I play the next note. So this is pretty powerful. I used this in the intro. So if we go to this track and say go to the oscillators, you can see that each of these, not all of them, creates a different sound. By the way, here, I went to an extreme and changed the engine to a particle engine. So the default engine for this timbre isn't particle, but this specific note triggers the particle engine. Now you can keep track of everything on the mod page. You can see which notes have locks, and you can go through them and view the locks. Like I mentioned, I think the limit is 16 locks. So you can go pretty far. You'll see this as you play the notes, by the way. So when I hit play, you can see this in action here, which I think is pretty cool. This is the sequence, by the way. We can keep sequencing more stuff. But yeah, I think you get the idea. One small tip, don't forget to stop recording when you've finished editing stuff, because if you happen to hold a note and move a parameter, that parameter change will only be locked to that specific note. So that's a bit confusing. There's actually a little N-lock record up here in the corner to remind you that you're in note lock record mode. I think it should blink or something, or you should get a pop-up after 5 minutes. Do you want to continue locking notes? Not that it happened to me, of course, but yeah, if it does, then you can easily see which notes are locked here on the keyboard and go ahead and clear whatever doesn't fit with what you were trying to do. Moving on, the last feature that's exclusive to Iridium Desktop MK2 is the flavor function or flavor knob. The idea here is that you get per note variation as you dial up flavor. It's kind of like the vintage feature you'll find on other synths, and you can control the extent of flavor on the flavor tab on the mod page. So you can have it increasingly apply to say pitch or envelopes, or the filter, different oscillators, and also panning, level, okay, so those are the new features for the Iridium Desktop Mark II and any other Iridiums you choose to send in for hardware upgrade and internal board replacement. Like I mentioned earlier, if you want a deep overview of everything this can do, check out my main Iridium Desktop video. However, firmware version 4 added a few interesting new features, so let's cover those briefly. The first interesting new feature is the Mutator. This is the default init patch. If we go into Layer and into Mutator, you can see we can mutate the different modules or the entire patch. Let's start conservative and mutate the oscillators. Okay. It's choosing not to be conservative. But as you can see, interesting things can happen. And you can reduce the mutate amount for more subtle changes to your sound, or go wild. Let's go for pitch, filter randomization. Let's randomize the envelopes, and this will work better on a patch with more going on in terms of the mod matrix. Same goes for mod amounts and effects. We'll need stuff going on in the matrix or in the effects section for this to do anything. So let's maybe go into the effects and turn on some effects. Let's maybe add drive here. Pretty nice. Anyway, let's try to mess things up. Nice. Let's see what it did. So if you're looking for inspiration, this can come in very handy. By the way, you can also mutate everything. Okay. Then one more interesting feature in the 4.0s, I'll go back to an init preset, is that the arpeggiator now has a few polyphonic modes. So let's turn it on, and I'll go into a chord mode here. So a regular arpeggiator sounds like this, and the new polyphonic arpeggiators will do stuff like this. Let's maybe increase the number of octaves. Let's go through a few of these options. I'll let the notes do the talking here instead of explaining what's going on. You can't program in your own patterns like you can, say, on the KeyStep Mark II or on Yamaha workstations. You've got quite a few polyphonic options and transpose options which don't necessarily adhere to octaves. All the existing arpeggiator parameters apply to these as well, like octaves. By the way, besides octaves, patterns apply to these as well. These are some of the standard built-in rhythmic patterns, as does direction. It's a nice added new touch if you're looking for some inspiration. Okay, let's talk about the pros and cons of the new Iridium Desktop Mark II and whether it's worth the upgrade. So first, and that's a major pro, you can actually upgrade. In most other cases these days, typically upgrading means selling what you've got at a loss and then buying a new synth. In this case, Waldorf lets you send in your synth for a main board upgrade. It's not cheap, several €100, but I think it's still much less than the cost of selling your synth used and then buying a new one. I believe the upgrade path includes all the Iridiums in the lineup, not just the desktop, by the way. Whether it's worth it is of course up to you, but relative to the price of the original synth, I dare say yes. You've got double the timbres, 4 instead of just 2. Still only 16 voices in total though, and then on top of that, material new synthesis features like the new Seeds oscillator and the note locks, both of which I dare say I've not seen on any other synth, hardware or software, except maybe the sound locks on Base Station 2, which is monophonic, and most others like Electron are per step locks, not per note locks. Feel free to correct me in the comment section below, and do check the comment section to see if someone found a synth I missed. Now, admittedly, the locks are somewhat limited in that you've got only 16 of them as opposed to loading an entirely different sound on a per note basis. So you do need to go around the synth and manually lock these for each note you want to change. Still, it's quite rare and I think a musically useful feature. For example, it turns this into a kind of drum synth for one timbre, leaving the other 3 to do whatever you want with. Now, there were some bugs, some skipped notes in the note locks, but hopefully those will be fixed with time. Besides that, a general pro for the Iridiums is the sheer number of synthesis engines that are built in per oscillator, and then the various filter, digifilter, and effects routings. There are very few other synths with this kind of diversity and capabilities. So those are the pros. On the cons side, like I mentioned, you've still got only 16 voices in total that you need to balance and spread out across your 4 timbres. And if you're into a large database of sampled instruments, you won't find those bundled here. You could still load up quite a few samples and multi-sampled instruments into this. Self-promotion alert, plenty of which you can find on my Patreon, but you'll need to get those and load them up, compared to workstations by Yamaha, Korg, and Roland, which have a much more diverse set of built-in multi-sampled instruments. Other cons on the hardware side, there's still a single output pair for all 4 timbres, and there's no audio over USB, not to mention multi-channel audio over USB, like you may find on some competitors. Then finally, on the hardware side, the touchscreen sometimes isn't responsive. It's actually being pretty responsive now. I think it happens more often on some screens rather than others. So that's it for Iridium Mark II. If you want to feed your synth with plenty of multi-sampled analog and digital synths, you'll find those on my Patreon, along with my ever-expanding book of electronic music ideas, tips, and tricks. Hit like if this was useful. Ring the YouTube bell below if you want to make sure you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching.